So this is our first demo. This is obviously in the neutral diffuse light setup. An overcast day. Dice is painting at a cafe, local cafe close to our studio. So I have a question. You've picked like kind of a very a subject matter I might not have picked. And I wonder if right now, I'm just curious, while you're painting, explain a little bit of what you see here, kind of what decisions do you make before you start painting?
Yeah, I guess, starting out, you really want to make sure you are envisioning where you want to be a little bit. So it's not like you're just copying what you're seeing in front of you. Of course, obviously, there are a lot of beautiful things out there in the world, but also it is important for us to train ourselves to see the beauty within things that we don't normally notice. That's what we should be capable of doing as an artist. And I try to make sure that I have some sort of a vision before I start. Like, for example, in this case, I saw there is this kind of nice complexity, simplicity and complexity within this mailbox and this red, newspaper box and yellow newspaper box next to it. And under this kind of overcast lighting, I thought maybe there's something beautiful there.
So, for you guys out there, we have this photograph of what Dice was seeing. So he took this photograph while he was painting. And I just want to talk a little bit about photography versus what we see. So we took this photograph for your reference. However, I'm looking outside out the window right now, and it looks very different. And there's some things that the camera sees, the way the camera sees is not necessarily how we see. So while we took this for reference, just keep in mind that it's not necessarily 100% accurate to what we actually see with your eye. That, and also it's a very abstract thing in the sense that this moment is frozen in time for you guys. Even as we're looking here, people are walking by, cars are parking in front of spots, and
a dog comes in front of my focal point. And
yeah, so that's kind of the fun and the challenge of painting outdoors and in plein air. Is that it is about observation. The better you kind of make decisions earlier on, I feel like the better you'll do as conditions change.
So for me, before we start, it's important to sort of know where you go. So when the weather changes or when things, unexpected things happens in the middle of painting, it's part of the game, painting outdoor, from life. You embrace it, you either embrace it and change it accordingly, or you stick to what you wanted to capture. In the end, it's not about accuracy, but it's about the feeling that you're trying to capture that you found beautiful.
I have a question about the painting, actually, specifically now that you're kind of getting into it. I noticed that you started with the mailbox. First of all, I'm always curious about how artists start, how other artists start, and what made you start with the mailbox, and talk us through a little bit of kind of what's going through your head.
And for me, the focal point was the mailbox, the edge that's created by the top of the mailbox, sort of top, and where the opening is. And I wanted to make sure that my judgment isn't an illusion in my head, and I quickly wanted to put it out in the picture.
I also noticed you don't do a whole lot of drawing. You kind of have these shapes and kind of, it's almost like an abstract painting at this point.
For me, it's always, a preference, I think. A lot of people like to do a line drawing first and then do a color, treatment on top of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I do that sometimes too, but I tend to sort of see shapes better. A part of it is like, as a painter, I was trained to see shapes more than lines. And it is somewhat for me easier to kind of capture lighting if I stick to the shapes, that I'm seeing. So the lines don't necessarily exist in the world, right? Like it's really more of a planes in the world that's kind of reacting to where the light is coming from. So for me, I like to stick to just shapes, when I'm painting.
Yeah, that's great. And then also, you use the Lasso tool quite a bit, kind of to create these sharp edges. And, I know it's something both of us do. It's kind of like you create these shapes with the Lasso tool, and you you're drawing there, but you're really creating these kind of hard edges, right?
Yeah, again, for me, I believe in big, nice silhouettes. And it's all about like creating sort of like for my drawing or the shape drawing of the mailbox has to be captured in this simple sort of silhouette form. If that looks like a mailbox I'm observing in front of me right now, then I'm in a good place. I'm in a good place to capture this mailbox. So I try to sort of capture that sort of silhouette of objects early on, and we'll get into more of the hard edges versus soft edges. But I think both Robert and I really believe in having nice contrast of soft edges versus hard edges. And it's a powerful tool, which you'll see in our demos quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think, as you're looking at this stuff and, you're watching, all this, as you're seeing this painting kind of come together, one thing that's difficult for us to show is actually as Dice is painting this stuff, I'm watching and there's a lot of squinting going on, looking up and constantly checking things, relationships, seeing how things fit together. But talk about like kind of squinting a bit and what you're seeing, what you're looking at as you're squinting, what relationships you're focusing on.
Yeah, so as I talked about a little bit earlier when we were looking at the photo reference, the squinting kind of allows you to really focus on the bigger relationship. And especially in this kind of diffuse lighting setup, it's very easy to get tricked into, because everything is soft, it's very easy to fall into the trap of not seeing the relationship in the bigger context. So for example, I want to make sure that the darkest dark stays within this mailbox lid, on the top of the mailbox. And it's not even the darkest dark, it's the contrast of the dark and the light, next to it, and the hard edges. You can kind of see how I created. And squinting would allow you to really stay focused on overall bigger picture, value structure, color structure, and edges.
Another thing that I think would be good to talk about is light direction. So earlier we talked about light direction, and the reason why overcast lighting like this looks like it does, it is because light is being filtered and is kind of bouncing all around. But overall, as you're painting these objects, there is a light direction.
Yeah, and obviously, the trait of overcast weather is, the light is coming from the sky. The sun is behind it, these kind of thick clouds, and the light is filtered, but it's coming still from the top to the bottom. And so you have this overall direction of top to bottom lighting. Because it's filtered and diffused, it kind of wraps around, so you don't have this sort of a direction from one side to the other as much. We'll get into the detail of how still you could have a slight light direction even under this kind of a lighting setup, but generally it's from top to bottom.
Yeah, so I noticed that I have a tendency sometimes when I paint to get into the details really quick, especially stuff like graphics and things like smaller things, just because it kind of takes it to its final resolution. And sometimes I like to take things all the way there, but I noticed you kind of waited. We're almost close to, it looks like you're finishing up the painting almost, and you're getting into those smaller details. What you're thinking here, how are you thinking about the bigger picture and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I guess one of the most important things that I try to do is to stay focused on sort of light, like where the light is hitting. So if the graphics is on the surface of an object, I try to focus on object planes, reacting to light first. And then those details, like graphics, I kind of deal with it later. But one of the, like you said, it's very common for all of us to want to write. For example, if it says United States Postal Service, you want to write that down, because you can read it, you can understand it, and I think those are the things I try to avoid. If I squint at it in the bigger context of the whole thing, I know I wouldn't pay attention to those.
Cool. You're also starting to paint the bike in there and get that, and it actually has a white tire, which is unusual. But what about painting the bike? Like you kind of left it later on, and it's a different kind of material and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not good at drawing or painting mechanical stuff. I'm as soon as I try to make sense mechanically, I fail because I don't have enough understanding of how mechanism of the bicycles work and stuff like that. So, I'm trying really hard to stay abstract, almost kind of without thinking about this is bike. I'm just responding to sort of like the impression of the shapes that I'm seeing. So, try not to think like where's the tire and where's the handles and the keys.
Cool. So that's similar to like what you were saying about graphics. You almost kind of are taking everything visually to have the importance that you see it as. So I think like a lot of times we have a tendency to paint symbols. Like when we think bike or we think a face, we think, a face has to have two eyes and a mouth and a nose. But when we look and we squint at things, it's not always exactly like that. And it's similar here, right, with how you're treating the bike. And
exactly. I mean, because all the symbols are dangerous because it comes without any sort of relationship to the light. And since we're focusing on light, and I always try to focus on light when I'm painting, I try to really just be responsive to what my eyes are seeing. And whether it's a bike or the mailbox or the graphics or anything, you are, kind of painting the impression of the light.
Great. So, just want to kind of return to what overall we'd like for you to focus on specific to this lighting setup. There is a real reason why we are starting with this specific lighting setup. But there are we'd love at the end of this lecture if you understood these three principles that make up this diffuse lighting setup. And those three things that we've really focused on are kind of softened cast shadows. And so actually we can look at what we're observing. Even in the photograph, you can see a lot of these things showing up, which are the softened cast shadows. So if you look kind of below the mailbox in the reference, you could see even in the photograph that the cast shadow that's coming off of the mailbox or a lot of these objects is fairly soft, fairly diffused and kind of blurred edge. And we talked about why. It's because of where the light's coming from and how the light's being filtered. And then the other thing that shows up as well is kind of darkened contact shadows. Mm-hmm. So where objects are meeting kind of the ground, specifically if you look at the red box, newspaper box, and look underneath it, there's that crisp kind of darkened edge where things are meeting.
And just really squint at it. Like if you squint at the picture or, in our case, what we're seeing right now, it is important to really squint because sometimes it's easy to kind of get distracted by the details. If you squint at it, you realize how dark it gets around the bottom of these objects because they are casting shadow. I mean, even though we don't call it cast shadow, it's not a crisp cast shadow, but it's very soft, diffuse cast shadow. So you don't think there's a shadow, but there is a shadow because, if you squint at it, you can see how dark it gets.
Right. It's really the absence of light.
Yeah.
Right? Light's not able to get into that crevice or those areas. So it creates the darkness. And then the last, obviously, which I think is the one that is most challenging as an idea because we think of overcast days as gray days. But in fact, local color is very much, and the photograph's a great example of that. You can see all the local color of all the objects within the photograph. Mm-hmm. And it's something unique and great about kind of overcast days is the local color of these objects, materials is really coming out.
Yeah. Okay. Seriously.
Yeah, so that completes our first lesson on schoolism, the diffuse neutral light setup.
Yeah, it was a very general demo, like it was in full color, and we're going to get into sort of like a more focused lesson in the next video. But I want to make sure that you understand that it's really about seeing. We really want to stress the power of observation.
Yeah, the assignment is to go out there, see the world, and paint it. We're really interested in your take on it. It's not so much capturing and copying what you see, so much as it is observing, processing, and applying what you know and your opinion, your artistry. That's what we're really excited about seeing in the paintings that you turn into us. So we really look forward to it, and we'll see you next week.